So this will be available to folks who were not able to make it with us tonight. But please be aware that we are on record, so don't stray off of mute during the presentation. And if you have any questions over the course of the presentation, please put them in the chat, and I will gather them and ask them to Andrea when we get to the latter part of the hour. You may also notice that in the chat, I've just put the link to, if you want to purchase copies from the publisher of the book, the link is in the chat. And I believe, Andrea, there's a discount code. You can tell us what it is when you are finished speaking or at the appropriate time. In any case, once again, this is a book talk sponsored by the Library of JTS, one of the great Jewish libraries in the world. While I have your attention, I want to draw it to the fact that as I speak, the library has mounted what is one of the best exhibitions of Hebrew manuscripts ever done at the Grolier Club in Midtown Manhattan, that's 60th Street between Madison and Park. We've got over 100 of our most fantastic manuscripts, and I invite you to drop in. The Grolier Club has a gallery that's open during museum hours. So you can just go and say you're interested, and trust me, it's a wonderful, wonderful experience, and we hope that you'll come. The exhibition closes on December 27th, so you've got plenty of time still to go and look at these works. Tonight, however, is not about the exhibition. It is about this book, which I guess is a kind of exhibition. You know what we're talking about, Lost Synagogues of Europe, which is both written and illustrated by Andrea. And I want to say just a few words of introduction about it. Andrea performs a miracle in this book. It was a miracle that we thought would have to wait till the end of days, but evidently it's possible even before the end of days. And that is that she has enacted a resurrection. This book is devoted to lost synagogues, synagogues that are no longer with us, of which there are many. And she has done enormous research. Very modestly in the introduction, she comments that she's not a historian. Well, I've got to tell you, I was intimidated, Andrea, by the work that went into your writing, the histories of the communities in which these synagogues were found. Absolutely remarkable. And I would add that the paintings, the illustrations, are absolutely delightful. They really do bring to life, in your very special style, the synagogues that you discuss here. And so I really encourage everyone, if you haven't seen the book in person, even before Andrea presents, I would encourage you to buy it. But Andrea, I'm going to let you take this over now. I'm going to take myself off screen, if I can find the right hide here where we are. You know what? The easiest way, there we go. The easiest way to do this is I'm supposed to stop the spotlight. There it is. I removed my spotlight and I
I'm
have
gonna
to find you on my screen. Say something, Andrea, and then you'll pop to the
okay,
top.
so should I
There you
start?
are. And let me put you on spotlight so everyone can see you. There you are.
Okay. So whoops, I did this share screen first. So I'll say a little bit. I thank you for all your words because it was a long haul to do all that research. And there were many people in academia who told me I was, there's no way you can do this. It's crazy. What are you thinking about? It's not possible. But I just kept plugging along, and I'm glad that people appreciated it. It was interesting. So I guess that's what kept me going. Um, and I just want to say at the beginning, Jewish Publication Society, which is the publisher, wants the book out there as much as it possibly can. So the discount, using the discount, the book, which is £4, is $20.17. So it's sort of affordable for everybody, even though it's a coffee table book. Don't be intimidated by it. Okay, so I put together this talk, which I try to answer what people ask all the time. I'm sure there'll be other questions, and we'll leave time at the end for other questions, but I'm going to share the screen now and start. Share.
There, it's coming up.
Okay, so everyone sees it now?
Well, we see it says Andrea Strongwater has started screen sharing.
Do you
Okay,
see
still a dark screen. Before it worked fine. There it is. We've got it.
Okay,
Perfect.
slow, slow.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so basically, I guess one of the reasons academic people told me I was crazy to do this is because officially I'm not a historian. I'm an artist, a visual artist, and I paint. But for me, I like to tell stories. I tell them with pictures, but I'm still a storyteller, which is why the writing, goes along with it. And when I started, I mean, I was always painting, but at one point, a woman called me, and she said, I'd like to license your artwork. And I really had no idea what that meant. Being an artist, my first question was, can I make a living doing that? And she said, absolutely. So this is one of the things I did in the licensing business. She was not Jewish. And if you look around the market, she said to me, you need a niche. And there's nothing really fabulous to license in Judaism. There's just not much stuff. And there really isn't. And so she asked me to do a Jewish calendar. So this was my Jewish calendar. It's an American calendar with Jewish themed artwork. And it did pretty well. We still haven't made it into a calendar, but it's been made into greeting cards and ceramic tiles. It was actually produced on chocolate. It was printed in sugar and attached to boxes of chocolates, which was a lot of fun. And the other thing about my work is I like to have fun. I like to enjoy myself. And so I did these. So after I did this, um, I wasn't sure what to do next because there really isn't that much iconic Jewish work for licensing for the mass market. So I ended up doing Hanukkah menorahs because that could sell. And then I didn't know what next to do. So I was rummaging through books. Did it go? It didn't go. How do I get to the next slide?
Just push the, you
Oh,
should
there we go.
push
Sorry.
there you go.
So I was going through books. My mother was Polish, and she liked to see things from Poland. And I bought this book for her. I was living in France, and I bought this book in France. It's not many people have it. There's only 250 copies made, and it's picture postcards of Jewish life from 1897 to 1917. And to me, it was very, very interesting. My mother I think she opened it once or twice, and that was it. So this is what it looks like inside. My college education, I went to College of Architecture, Art, City and Regional Planning. And those were the three things that I was always interested in. I was always interested in architecture. I didn't really want to go through the whole process of architecture. I just like architecture and I like figuring it out. So I decided also in the licensing business, most women will know this. When you go buy a box of cards, there'll be 4 different designs and there'll be, 3 or 4 copies of the one design. So you always do a set of something because that's the best way to sell it. This is all marketing stuff. So I decided I would do synagogues. My pointer comes out, right?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so I did this synagogue and 3 others. Now, in this book, I actually, I speak French, so I could read the book. My mother couldn't. It says that this synagogue was destroyed. So I painted this one, and I painted Karlovy Vary, Bochum, and Luxembourg, and the story was they were all destroyed in the book. They were all destroyed, and you can see if I go back, it was a lot of work to figure out what this really looked like. I mean, I think you need a little more education to figure, they're gray, they're blurry. You have to have a little more information to figure out what it really looks like. So anyway, I was at a meeting for the Conference of American Jewish Museums, and this woman said they were showing these paintings, and the woman said, "Oh, well, this is Turin in Italy," and she said, "I was just there, for services," and the book said it was destroyed. So I realized I had to do more work, to figure out what was going on. And after I did these, I did 4 more. And then the Holocaust Museum Memorial, I never remember exact names, but the Holocaust place in DC, Memorial, right? In DC, asked me to make postcards out of my paintings for their shop because they felt people were always asking what happened to the buildings, and people really didn't pay that much attention to the details of the buildings, other than it burnt down, it was destroyed. That was sort of the general thing. So I made the postcards, and I kind of realized this didn't start out to be a book. It developed along the way. So I realized that I could use these paintings to tell a story. The problem was that the information I would get, let me go back a minute. I'm going to go for these. Like, for example, it was very hard to find images. They're mostly old postcards. The Germans have building plans and much more documentation. And there's some Polish documentation it's pretty good on the wooden synagogues. But basically, I remember I had gotten a postcard that said synagogue in Lvov, which is now Lviv, which was another problem. At any rate, it turns out when I did the research, and I actually did research at the Jewish Theological Seminary, and I had the Cornell University library system that I could use. And there was just, and online is the Encyclopedia Judaica from 1906 and another version from 1970. So those are kind of the basics of what I started with. So this postcard comes up, synagogue in Lvov. And it turns out there were 21 major synagogues in Lvov. And I, at that point, had no idea, because if you're telling the story, you need facts. You can't just say synagogue in Lvov. I mean, it needs much more information. So I called the guy, the head of research at the Holocaust Memorial in DC, and I said to him, where are the books? Because I had read everything I could on synagogues at the Theological Seminary and Cornell. And he said, you're it. No one has put all this information together. So if you want the information, you're going to have to do all the research. There's no textbook that you can go to. I thought I was just going to go and, pull up information like from an encyclopedia someplace, but that's not what happened. So anyway, I started doing the research, and I kept painting. I mean, the other thing that surprised me was everybody loved these paintings. It wasn't just Jewish people. I had, a guy at Fidelity Investments in his office who was Chinese, and he wanted to hang them in his office. So, I felt, I guess, strongly that this was a story that would work. And for me, I don't do Holocaust stuff because it's too depressing. It's too upsetting. And for me, because I knew all those people, my mother was from Poland, all I do is cry. And if you're crying, you can't really understand the story. So the concept here is that the buildings are telling the story. That's sort of how I got into the buildings. So when I started working on it, one of the easier things to research are the wooden synagogues in Poland. And that's because there was a whole lot of research done, I guess it was mostly between World War I and World War II. And there's a terrific book where all these synagogues were documented, and the Polish government, the research institute, which was attached to Polytech in Warsaw, wanted to make the buildings national historic landmarks. It didn't really happen. They all got burned down. But they did all this research. This is the book that they published. The documentation, a lot of it lasted through the war, got moved from place to place and managed to survive. And this book was published in Polish and English. English was 1954. So this is what I had to work with. And I had to figure out, how, because I realized that a lot of people look at this and it's hard to figure out for people that aren't familiar with buildings or you need a different kind of education. Not everybody can understand this. So these are more of the pictures in there. So this was one of my, one of the things I figured out how it was doing. So the thing about the wooden synagogues is they were totally, totally decorated, from all the walls, the ceilings, everything was decorated. It had prayers written on the walls. They were very, very elaborate and very beautiful. And they were built from the 1600s to the 1700s. So this is one of the images I painted from that. So this is one of the wooden synagogues. And if you look on the right, you can see that this was wood. First of all, at that time, there were no nails. These things were all pieced together. So this wood was most likely wet, formed, and then pasted together. And they have these medallions. So this ceiling was in this synagogue. And this was the way I painted it. So the idea was to bring them back to life. That was really what I wanted to do. And I wanted you to feel like you could go into them. And I think it worked.
I think it did. While you're pausing for a breath, there are two really good questions in the chat. The first one is, I mean, obviously the work to prepare this is immense. How long did the research take for you to prepare this book? And there was a question also about the colors. Was there evidence of the colors of the synagogues inside and out, or is that your imagination doing the reconstruction?
So this is what I mean about having an education. So when I look at things, I know what the material is, right? So I chose colors that were correct for the material. If it was brick, there are many colors of brick, and I just chose one color. But it's not completely imagination. It's sort of guided imagination. And what was how long did the
How long
research
did the
take?
research take for this? Yeah, it's enormous.
A long, long time. I did other things. It wasn't like I was just glued to this entirely, but I did the first paintings in 2009, and the book was published in 2025. But there was 5 years that kind of don't count. Well, I sort of count. So I got Jewish Publication Society agreed to publish the book in October 2019. But if you remember, October 2019 was very close to COVID. So March 2020, they called me and they said, we're canceling the book.
Ooh.
We don't think, we'll be able to handle this. And, this is such a big, it's a big project for not just for me, but for them. We're just going to cancel it. And I said to Barry, I said, listen, let's just put it on hold for a year and rethink it in a year from now. Because, I've been through bad times. They don't last forever. It just was the wrong time. March 2020 was the wrong time to cancel something. So the preparation of the book took most of that time. He changed his mind in about 3 months and, and actually gave me an assignment to do more interiors. So during COVID, all that stay-at-home time, I was painting interiors, which are in the book. So I think those are the two questions. But and the other thing is, oh gosh, I had I don't know if anyone knows her, but my manuscript editor is a woman named Joy Weinberg. And she is very, very, very particular and asked a million questions. No matter what I said, I had to prove it. Every single thing that I wrote, she made me prove it. And there's a lot of stuff that I couldn't prove, which is not in the book. There are a lot of fun rumors. I'll call them rumors because we don't know how to, make them for real. So it was a long time. It was a long time. But I'm happy that it shows. The responses I'm getting is that people see that I put in all that kind of work.
Yeah, very evident.
Yeah, which is nice. Also as a visual artist, you don't often get feedback. It's hard. So this was another one. I like this one because if you look at this, so these synagogues were built by itinerant carpenters. And once they built all the synagogues and the synagogues were kind of, not being done anymore, where it was still being done, they made carousels. They also designed carousels. And if you look at this, to me, this looks like a carousel. And I have another one that's really like a carousel. This is a wall. You can see it's all carved. And some of the synagogues, I'm not exactly sure what this is. It looks like, strings of pearls. There's another wooden synagogue that had bells, tingly bells on the curtains that covered the Torah, so that when you open the Torah, it just tingled. Which I thought it's a very romantic synagogue. We'll get to that one. That this is the one that had the bells on it. And the other fun thing was that the wooden synagogues had prisons. And the research was very, very difficult, and there was never a lot of anything. It was always bits and pieces. So the thing I found for this synagogue was the journal. They had a journal where they wrote down every single thing that happened. So in this synagogue, there was a man who was put into the prison. I think it was just overnight. And then when they let him go, he had to stand there, and the leaders of the synagogue spat at him. They just spat. And they decided that was the punishment. That was a valid punishment. And the crime was that on a fast day, he went to another town and ate. Which, who knew you could be punished for that? But he was punished. This is the one that, to me, just looks exactly like a carousel. And this one, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through some of the synagogues and just give you little tidbits about them. There's much more in the book. I'm just giving you a few sentences about them, but there's much more story in the book. So this one is Livorno. And the other thing about doing the research, why it was so interesting, was we think of all this as history, but for me, it doesn't, it's so connected to life that it doesn't feel like history. It just feels like this is part of life. Why didn't I know that before? Kind of thing. And actually, that is how I wrote the book. It's not academically written. It's written, as I said, like grandma's telling you all these stories. So this was built in 1603 in Livorno, which in English is Leghorn. The land was owned by the Medici family, and it was a swamp. It was, it's on the water. It was really a swamp. And they decided that they wanted to turn it into a business city, a mercantile kind of city. And it turns out that in many eras, but if you wanted your city to be a business-like city, you were the leader. You would invite the Jews. You would invite Jews in because the Jews knew how to run business. And so it had a very big Jewish population. They actually developed their own language. It wasn't Ladino. It wasn't Yiddish. They had their own language that also died during World War II, after World War II. And it was very beautiful. And the other thing is that this particular community existed even after World War II, and the synagogue was destroyed. But what they did was, if you look at these windows, see these odd-shaped windows, the new synagogue they built has these windows. So there's an echo of the past.
Mhm.
And this is what the interior looked like,
Hmm.
which I really like that interior.
Beautiful.
And of course, there was always a lot of light. There, all these light fixtures. I mean, it's candles, but the synagogues always have a lot of light in them. This is Vilno. So the other thing about the names, when I first started doing the research, oh my God, there were so many names and they don't all match up. It's Vilno, Vilnius, Vilna. Those you can figure out as the same place. But there are other places where you can't tell that it's Presburg and something else which don't match up. So it was terribly, terribly confusing. So I really like maps. So I went to the map room at Cornell, and the guys there, they had helped me earlier, but the guy that ran the map department and two of the assistants were from Middle Europe. So they knew these places firsthand. They weren't Jewish, but these places were real to them. And so they said to me that a good academic decision, a good scholarly decision, was to pick a year and name everything in the anglicized version of the language that it was in that year, the country that it was in that year, which worked for me. And that's how I named everything. But Jewish Publication Society didn't like that. So they changed all the names. So if you buy the book, there's one chart which has all the names as they are currently. And then there's another guide, which is in the language of what it was in 1936. So they put both of those things in there, which is useful to me. So the guy that did the language system is actually an emigre to Israel from Russia. So his angle is completely different from mine. So he's the one that came up with all the names, the proper way to do all the names. So this is Vilnius. I may not say it the right way, but Vilna understands. And this was fun. On this side, if you go along this side, is the market square. And this gate was given by the tailors. It was very, very huge. It could hold, I think, something like 6,000 people on the high holy days. And the other thing is synagogues there were rules for building synagogues. So this one you can see there's sort of 3 stories here, but they wanted a 5-story building. And so what they did was they dug down. If you see here, to get into the synagogue, you have to go down steps. So 2 stories are below the earth and the rest is above. And they did these and they added these columns. This was built in 1633-ish. And probably about 100 years later, they added these very, very grand, Baroque columns. And the synagogues were constantly fixed, updated, renewed. And this one is sort of interesting also. There's a lot of information I don't have. So this one, the communists, when the communists came, they put a playground on top of the underground part of the synagogue, right? Because the synagogue was destroyed, they put a playground on top. So sometime before COVID, the mayor decided that they were going to get rid of the playground and excavate and see what was really under there. The thing is, I don't know if it actually happened or not, but he did make declarations and said he had the money and did all that kind of stuff. So there may be more information there. I'm pretty sure the outline of the synagogue is probably on the ground. And a lot of these synagogue spaces have a plaque I guess it's important, but I didn't find it very meaningful. The town where my mother is from, the synagogue is completely gone. And there's like a stela, like a stone column, short, with a message about the synagogue. I don't know, it just didn't do anything for me. This one was also fun because it was the first Reform synagogue, 1810. And it was built on a school, it's a school. And it was built on the school grounds. And Mr. Season had a lot of ideas about all these synagogues were built with ideas behind them. You didn't just build a synagogue. A group would get together and decide what they wanted the synagogue to say. They had ideas behind all this. So this one, they wanted to assimilate. They wanted to be Jewish, but they wanted to be like Christian people. So it had a choir. This is when they decided to do confirmations rather than well, it wasn't bat mitzvahs, bar mitzvahs. They just had confirmation for everybody. They had a choir. They had clocks on the thing. They did the talking in this is Germany, so they did it in German rather than Hebrew. So this was one of the rumors that I couldn't put in the book, but I can talk about it in a talk. So there was a lot of animosity between reformists and Orthodox people. I mean, there was a lot of stuff going on. So a lot of the older rabbis that I spoke to would tell me that at one time, and I don't remember all the details, but at one time there was a big fight between, an Orthodox rabbi and a Reform rabbi. And somehow one of the rabbis ate something and then he never woke up again, kind of thing. But no one will pin it down, you know what I mean? So it could be just a rumor or things that people say. But there were rumors that I enjoyed hearing, that people talk about in a very serious way. But I couldn't put that in because I'm supposed to be exact in the book. So that was Season. And this one I had a big fight with my manuscript editor because there is a plaque. School still exists, and there is a plaque recognizing the synagogue. I could not find out where it was. I called the school, I emailed, I did everything I could, and no one would answer my questions. That's the other thing. Not everybody talks to you when you do this research. So that's out of it. But there is recognition that this existed. Many of the synagogues, part of the destruction, it's really hard to call it destruction. It was more like erasure, because a lot of the synagogues, they actually got rid of the street. So you can't really go visit it because there's no way to get there. There's no there. So there were other synagogues that were built as fortresses. And one of the things was it had to be protection for when the invaders came. But it also was protection for the Jews when they wanted to not get killed. So this is Belz. And Belz is, well, I'm going to another one. Belz was built later than another one, but 1843. But the people that survived from Belz built, it exists. It's the largest synagogue in the world in Jerusalem. I believe it's Jerusalem. Yes, Jerusalem. It's the Belz Synagogue, and it is humongous. It's got these huge crystal chandeliers just spaced all over the ceiling. It's very, very big. And the sect is pretty active. So this is another one, Lebamel, which was built as a fortress, but it was much more complicated than Belz, much more, bigger, much bigger. And this is Belz. So the thing about Belz, when the Nazis wanted to destroy synagogues, they would toss in gasoline and light things on fire. They would mostly blow things up or light things on fire. And this one they couldn't destroy. The walls are supposed to be 3 feet thick. They couldn't destroy it. So what they did was they made the Jewish men come and take it apart brick by brick. So I did in the book include how and when things were taken apart, but it's not the focus of the stories. I'm really focusing on what happened there, what it was like, and when the Jews arrived. That was also a big deal to figure out the political situation, because the synagogue started in the 1630s. And a lot of these places weren't countries. They were principalities or that belonged to missionary. There was one place that belonged to the missions, the monks. So I had to define all that. So that's actually defined in the book where all these places actually were. And this is Niazovich. I don't say it correctly, but it's Niazovich. This one, this town had a matzah factory, and they used to make matzah for everyone in the area, not just for them. And the noteworthy thing, obviously when you do this work, there's a certain level of sadness and anger. I mean, I did cry a lot, but I was more angry that these things had been stolen. You know what I mean? It was just make me very angry. And then you wonder like what the people did. So in this one, the Jewish community collected when the Nazis came and made it into a ghetto. They collected everything they could for weapons. And it included a machine gun. They did have one machine gun. And so when they found out, and all of these communities, even when they were ghettoized and afflicted by, the Nazi government, they kept their organization, they kept the schools going, they fed themselves as best they could. There's one place where the USDA studied how they fed themselves because they were healthy, even though they were living on very limited food. The food situation was doable, worked. But this one, they fought back. When they found out that they were going to be totally eliminated, they fought back. And some of them left and lived. Oh, they also had a summer camp. This was very community oriented. So they also had a summer camp for the kids. So the kids would go into the forest every summer. Remember, summer camp. It was summer camp. That was the other thing about all of this, is all the things that we do. I mean, I grew up in New York. I don't think it's that much different everywhere, but all the things that we normally did, summer camp, all the youth groups, all the grown-up groups, the theater, the books, all that stuff, we've done it forever. It's always been there. And that's one of the really interesting things for me was, we've always been this, whatever it is, all this stuff, we've always done all this. So these people had a summer camp. So the people that escaped the Nazi destruction went and lived in the woods. And then they ended up fighting for, first they fought with the Russians against the Germans. And then, a lot of them got killed. Is this the one that was the Bielski boys? I mean, I don't remember all
Yes, yes.
Yeah, this is the Bielski boys. So some of these people moved to Israel, and there is a movie about them, some of these guys. So that's what I mean. I want the history to not be history. I want it to be, this is part of our life. We should know this. And this one was Bad Buko. I didn't know it was Bad when I first started. Bad is like a spa town.
Mm-hmm.
And this was another group. There were groups that wanted to be Christian. They wanted to look like Christian people. So it's a synagogue, but it looks like a church. And that was, on purpose. They wanted to look like a church. I tend to go on too long, so if I'm going too long, just
Take another few minutes and then we'll take questions.
okay. And this is the interior of this one.
Beautiful.
And this one always makes me laugh because this is a synagogue and they wanted to look Gothic. They decided they wanted to look Gothic because that would make them look like they had been there forever. You know what I mean? They wanted to be part of the community. This is actually where Budweiser beer comes from. And they wanted to look like the community. So they did flying buttons, which is a technical thing that you don't need anymore. So anyway, here's the synagogue. And I actually met a guy who was bar mitzvahed here.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is, I sort of enjoy this story also. This is, at the time I was doing it and I went by my map guys, it was Danzig, but it's now Gdansk, Poland. But when the synagogue existed, it was a separate entity. It didn't belong to Poland. It was partly Polish, but anyway, it was a separate entity. So this synagogue was put together by 5 smaller synagogues nearby. It had a library, it had a concert hall, it had, a theater. It had a museum, it had everything you could possibly think of. Now, one of the things that happened was that when Jews started losing their jobs, this is an enormous building. They couldn't keep up the building. So the government would come and say, you have to sell us the building. And they would sell the building like for $100, it wasn't really to make money. But anyway, they sold the building and the government put up a big sign across that whole front, across this front, that said, "Come, lovely May, and free us from the Jews." And then May 1st, they blew up the entire building. Now, I know that's a sad thing. It is a sad thing. But Mel Brooks's father is from this town. And every time I see that sign, "Come, lovely May, and free us from the Jews," I think of springtime for Hitler in Germany, right? Which is kind of what I mean. It's like history is not really history. It's not in the past. It's really part of what we live in one way or another. So anyway, springtime for Hitler in Germany. That's how I remember this building. This is the interior. And that honestly was really what was so infuriating, was what kind of mind would go into a place like this and just burn it and just totally destroy it. It's hard to understand. I know it was done, but it's hard to understand that mindset for me. Although today there are other reasons, but let's see. Okay, and this is also an interesting thing. This is Frankfurt. Now, this was a contest. Very often when you build a building, even today, you do a contest for architects. Oh, so I name all the architects I can. The book has all the architects in it, all the architects I could find. So there was 120 submissions to build this building, and some guy won number 1, and the guy who came in third got the job. I asked some of my architect friends why, and we're all sure it just had something to do with money. Like someone decided this was the one they want. And the Rothschild family is connected to this synagogue. So I figure the Rothschild guy said, nah, I like number 3 better. So the thing that's amazing is these arches. They just put arches everywhere. All of these arches. And the thing is that this goes along the street, and this is at an angle. The entryway is along the street, and the building is at another angle. And like a lot of the other synagogues I've done, this has, a mikveh, a school, more like, the combination of a synagogue and a JCC. A lot of these synagogues were really where people lived and did things. So there's a lot of extra room here. But then if you go to the interior, you see they keep doing, and these were all decorated, but you see they just kept going with this curve and the curve and the curve. It's very dramatic. Anyway, so that's Frankfurt. And this is Warsaw. This is actually where my grandfather went. And it was very political. This is where I put together my history with, the reality, where people went there and talked about politics and what Judaism was and would be and how it could be, moving into the future. And actually, that old line, there are two synagogues. That's a synagogue I go to, and that's the one I would never step foot in.
Mm-hmm.
So this synagogue, a lot of synagogues have writing on the walls. And on this synagogue, they wrote, I don't remember the exact quote, but they used the word God. They wrote God rather than one of the substitutes that you do, so you don't write God. And so they were people that wouldn't go there because they wrote God. You know what I mean? It was an anathema to them. So there were always people who wouldn't go to whatever synagogue was built. There were some synagogues that were built. There's one in Amsterdam, and they built on Saturdays. The construction crew worked on Saturdays. And so there were people that wouldn't go there because it was built on Saturdays. And this is the interior of that one. It was very, very grand. And this one is actually written about a lot in German. There was a German writer that wrote about it. And this is Tartu. This is the interior. This is Dortmund. Dortmund was used as a test to see if Kristallnacht would work. It was September. They had a meeting outside. The government had a meeting outside, and then they just blew it up. And it was to see what people would do. It's hard to know what to do. This is Tübingen, which is a tiny little synagogue, but it's a university town. This is the interior. And this is Heitzing in Vienna. And it was also a contest. They had two contests. And the guy who designed this was a refugee to the United States. And he was a prop master in Hollywood. And he designed this. And this is the last one chronologically, which is, that period of time when everything was a big box. But this is the interior, which really hard to see, but it had all this stuff engraved in the walls, which I really liked. And this is Karlovy Vary, which is Czechoslovakia, which, if people remember, was a little bit like the Catskills. People went there all the time. And this was the interior. And the reason I like it is because things that I wonder about. Jews are so closely knit and related. I thought, how did all that happen? And this was a place where all the matchmakers used to go in the summer. So I have this vision of them, going through their books at a table or dancing all night, and figuring out who would go with who. So I think that's the end of this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. There are a variety of comments. I don't know if you've been following them at all as they've come up during your presentation. Several people have just commented on how beautiful the paintings are, how, the skies and clouds behind them kind of bring it to life, put it in a setting that really vivifies the images that you create. One person commented with surprise, and I don't know what you know about it, on the synagogue that had the prison. What I confess, I didn't know about this. What surprised me was that the Jewish community had the authority to imprison its members in the synagogue. So what do you know about that?
The Jews did not live, how do I say this? The Jews did not live by regular rules. The Jews always had their own system. They had their own their own rules, their own. They had their own legal system. They had their own prison system. Jews were the other, and they were not included. But Jewish people are organized. Do you know what I mean? Like if you alienate a whole bunch of people, they don't always make their own world.
Hmm.
When you alienated the Jews, they just created their own world. So even when you built a synagogue, the Jewish community had all these rules they had to live by, and they would go to the prince or whoever was ruling the country and say, "This is what we want," and their system was different than building a church. Their
Hmm.
system of building houses was different than a church, and there was one town. It is in the book where they didn't want a lot of Jews, so they made a rule that Jews were only allowed to have one child, and then you couldn't get married. There was another one where you couldn't get married. So the Jewish people lived in a completely different system,
Hmm.
and were punished differently. A guy the other night when I did a presentation, he said, that he felt that they had Jewish prisons because they wanted them to eat kosher. But, the thing is, I'm not sure that that's true, because the way they found out they were prisons is when they were doing research, they found chains. They
Hmm.
found, those chains where you tie people to the wall. They found the prisons.
But
Um,
you also said that you knew of a case where someone was in prison because they went on a fast day to another community and ate there. Was that a diary testimony? Where did you find that out?
that was in a synagogue journal,
Hmm.
a journal.
Got it.
Um, a lot of these things are not in English, obviously.
Hmm.
So every now and then, I mean, I guess I did a lot of digging.
Hmm.
So I found odd things, but they were, what do you call it? I made sure they were real. I mean,
Hmm.
I didn't do anything fake.
Right. Right. Okay. So someone asked, and given the immensity of this work, did you have any kind of foundation or other support to support this project?
No, you need to buy a book.
Oh, okay. So we're the ones supporting the project.
Yes, I did get a grant from the New York, New York, New York State Council of the Arts, New York State
Uh-huh.
Council of the Arts. I did get a grant from them. I didn't get any Jewish grants.
Hmm.
Everyone poo-pooed me for a very long time.
Hmm.
A lot of people didn't take me seriously.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
it,
And
it
are the
was it
image
was
are the images, do they exist in separate paintings? I mean,
Oh
could
yes, yes. The images, if you go to AndreaStrongwater.com, I actually sell the paintings. I sell prints.
Hmm.
I've actually made jigsaw puzzles out of a lot of the images, which
Wow.
is kind of fun.
Hmm.
But that's easy. It's just AndreaStrongwater.com, and it's where we once gathered the file folder. So all of this stuff is for sale.
Oh, okay. So people who have affection for a particular community or its synagogue, they can acquire it.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So, Andrew, this is great. I mean, I think, as you brought the images in front of our, eyes, and we saw the beauty of them, and they evoke in a very powerful way the histories of the communities behind them. So I'm going to actually, if you would stop sharing
Okay.
your screen, and I am going to remove the spotlight, if I can do that. Let me just see. I'm going to add a spat, or I'm going to replace a spat. So this is me right now that you should be seeing. I want to thank you so much. Again, at the beginning of the chat, there is a link for purchasing the work. And if people are interested in hearing you speak in person, someone asked about that. Do you have your schedule on your website?
I don't have the schedule on the website. Oh, you mean they want to see me at another time?
Yeah, if you're speaking somewhere else, sure.
Yes. I didn't do that. I didn't think of doing that, but I
Oh,
guess I could do that.
okay.
The thing is, it's completely evolving. So
Hmm.
if someone wants to see me, the best thing is to email me.
Okay, great. So I got the link. Someone just asked, the
To
link
put
for
over
purchase
there.
is at the beginning of the chat. It's already there. You can find it. Again, let me thank you very much. Absolutely beautiful. And let me remind all of you that if you want another kind of artistic historical treat, if you either live in the New York City area or find yourself in New York City before the end of December, please do go join us at the Grolier Club in Midtown Manhattan to see this amazing exhibition. It's called Jewish Worlds Illuminated. You can find information about it on the Grolier Club website. If you're unable to make it, it is entirely online on their site. You can see all of the images as well as the text. Obviously, there's a big difference between seeing something in person and seeing it online, but if you can't make it, it is online. And you will also find a video tour of the exhibition there online, which features two of the curators of the exhibition, myself and Sharon Lieberman Mintz. So I encourage you to look that up. Thank you for joining us, and look for other announcements of book talks coming in the near future. Bye bye. And Andrea, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Sure.